Life rolls along. We eat, sleep, work, and play with predictability. And then something unexpected happens. It happens in our family. It happens at work. It happens with our health. It happens maybe through a natural disaster or some other kind of tragedy. Now listen, that's when you find out about people. Well, when those things happen, that's when you find out what a person really is all about. As many of you know, I pastored here from 94 to 2000 and then was in Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi for 8 years. Came back here 18 years ago. While I was in Mississippi, Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. The evening, while the storm was taking place and it just ended, the Disaster Relief Agency, it's an agency of Southern Baptists, called and asked about 5 or 6 pastors in the Jackson area to come to the Gulf Coast and to see how we could help. And they wanted us there the next morning. And so we loaded in a van and we drove down, and we were able to have access to the coast and to Gulfport and that area, Biloxi, where most people weren't able to be there. In fact, families weren't able to get back to their homes, and we were the first ones there. It was one of the most incredible experiences of my life, as I've shared, standing on the beach in absolute silence. You couldn't hear no animal, no dog, cats, birds. You didn't see any of them. You didn't hear anything. The wind, you couldn't even hear the wind. There were no leaves on the trees. They'd been completely stripped. Disaster everywhere. They took us through a few neighborhoods. And the guy who was driving explained to us that if the house was there. Now, several of the houses on the coast were lifted off their foundation and they landed 1 mile inland and dropped on either top of a house or on another lot. It was unbelievable. But they said as we drove along, there'd be a house, if it was standing, would have an X on the outside of the house. And there were numbers on it. If there was no house, then they would have a piece of plywood, and there would be an X. And in those triangular spaces, there would be numbers. One of those numbers represented the number of people found dead in the house. And they were still, at that day, it was just the day after, they were still, pulling people out as we were driving along. It was just unbelievable. Now, the thing about it is that for several days, everybody along the coast was being warned about the storm, and they were told to evacuate. Most people did, but there were many who decided to stay in that particular area in their homes. And the surge was 20, 25 feet high. It would cover the house. And those people all died because they decided to stay. A wise person makes wisdom a priority. A wise person makes wisdom a priority. And that's what Solomon is talking about as we see in Ecclesiastes chapter 10. He asked God for one thing. God granted him one wish, and that was for wisdom. And God gave him wisdom. And as a result, he wrote 3 books. He wrote Proverbs, he wrote the Song of Solomon, and Ecclesiastes about the things he had learned and experienced as it related to wisdom. And so these are called today the books of wisdom. Solomon knew the difference between foolishness and wisdom. And in chapter 10, we're going to see how he really spends much time talking about the difference between the two. In these 3 books that he wrote, the words fool, fools, foolish, or folly is used 128 times. In this one chapter, he uses that word 9 times. The question we're going to answer today is, how can I keep from becoming a fool? Nobody intentionally wants to be a fool. They don't want to be called a foolish person. But we all make foolish decisions. So how can we keep that from happening? Solomon's going to look at 4 major areas of life and show a comparison of the wise person and the foolish person. Notice, first of all, that he speaks of foolishness in little things. Chapter 10, verse 1. Now, if you're a guest, we're going through the book of Ecclesiastes. We have a couple more weeks, but today we're in chapter 10, verse 1. Dead flies make a perfume's oil ferment and stink. So a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. A wise man's heart goes to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. Even when the fool walks along the road, his heart lacks sense, and he shows everyone he is a fool. Now, in verse 1, Solomon is describing a fly that's landed in a jar of perfume oil or ointment. And the fly dies and spoils, ruins the ointment. And so when the person opens the bottle, they don't get this sweet perfume smell. It's a foul stench that comes out. And the oil is ruined. The perfume is ruined. Solomon is describing what one little sin can do to a person's character, their reputation, or even their life. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 5, "Don't you know that a little yeast permeates the whole batch of dough?" In the Song of Solomon, Solomon talks about, in chapter 2, little foxes that ruin the vineyards. I've shared before, when I was in Orlando, I was out at the university. I was a chaplain for the football team, and the space shuttle Challenger was going up in the air, and I stopped and stood by the road just a few miles from where I was standing, and I watched it exploded and fall out of the sky. You know what caused that? One small thing, an O-ring between two parts in the space shuttle. They knew that there was a problem, but they didn't pay attention to that little thing, and it cost people's lives. Charles Spurgeon, 1859, he wrote a sermon and preached it called The Little Sins. Little Sins. And he said this: "The best men have always been afraid of little sins. Men with their eyes well opened by divine grace have seen a whole hell slumbering in the smallest. Gifted with a microscopic power, their eyes have seen a world of iniquity hidden in a single act or thought or imagination of sin, and hence they have avoided it with horror. They have passed by and would have nothing to do with it." He's saying that they see this little sin, this little temptation, this opportunity, but they play it out in their mind, as I've said before. Where is this going to go if I continue in this little thing? He continues, "Little sins lead to great ones. Nay, stand back. Little though the temptation be, I dread thee, for thy little temptation leads to something greater, and thy small sin makes way for something worse." And then he illustrates the point, talking about the thistle bush. He said in Australia there were no thistle bushes until a Scotsman decided that he was going to send a few small seeds from his thistle bush. He loved the blooms of the thistle bush. And he had a friend in Australia, and he wanted him to have one of these bushes. So he mailed in a small envelope a few seeds, and the man planted the thistle bush in his backyard in the garden. Before long, a few years, thistle bushes covered entire parts of Australia. It was a plague for the farmers. And Spurgeon says this: "Take heed of the thistle seed, little sins are like it. Take care they are not admitted into your heart." Now the problem is thistle seeds are everywhere. Little opportunities to do the wrong thing. We don't pay much attention to it. And then, as they say in my office, I didn't know it was going to lead to this. I didn't know I'd find myself here. Well, nobody wants that, and nobody says that. But that's what we find with the little things. So we pay attention. Speaking of the heart, Solomon says in chapter 10, verse 2, "A wise man's heart goes to the right, but a fool's heart to the left." Now, in biblical times, the right hand represented power, favor, skill, strength. The left hand represented weakness. Somebody said, you may have said, "I can beat you with my left hand," or "I can beat you with my right hand tied behind my back." We say that because the right hand represents strength. The word sinister comes from a Latin root word meaning left hand. Now, if you're left-handed, raise your hand right now. Look around. Watch out for these people. They're sinisters. You gotta be careful, all right? Solomon says obedience in the little things implies that you're standing in a place of wisdom, a place of power, of blessing. Jesus in the wilderness faced Satan's temptations. And Satan said, "If you are the Son of God, why not just command these stones to become bread?" It was a little thing, but it was an eternal thing. Had Jesus yielded to that little sin because he was hungry, Satan knew that, there'd be no Savior, no salvation, no heaven, no Linwood Baptist Church. We wouldn't be here today had Jesus yielded to that one little sin. Solomon concludes in verse 3 that you can discern what sort of person a person is by the way they walk along the road. Now, he's not meaning that literally. He means by their daily behavior in life. You watch them long enough and you're going to see whether they're wise or a fool. What's his point? We need to pay attention to the little things. Notice, secondly, he talks about foolishness in leadership. He provides sound advice for those who lead and those who follow leaders. In tough times, we look to our leaders. Families, churches, businesses, cities, states, nations, we're all desiring strong, wise leadership. Weak, foolish leaders can have a devastating effect. We see that in presidents. We see that in foreign leaders, those who are wise, those who are foolish. But if you really want to understand it, go to the books of 1st and 2nd Kings. After Solomon, what you find is a comparison, really, of those who were wise and godly leaders and those who were foolish, ungodly leaders. Those who were wise and godly led the nation to prosperity. Those who were ungodly, who were unwise, led it to a nation that suffered. We need leaders who will lead. In 1954, Winston Churchill was giving a speech reflecting on his leadership during World War II and fighting the Nazis. And he said this, "I've never accepted what many people have kindly said, namely, that I inspired the nation. The people of England and others around the world had the lion heart. I had to give the roar." I love that. That's what his role was in leading the nation. And that's what people are desiring. And that's what God is desiring of us. And all of us, listen, are in a position of leadership. Every one of us are influencing someone, so we need to lead. Godly leaders lead. Solomon describes 4 kinds of foolish leaders here in the text. First, he describes irrational leaders in verse 4. "If the ruler's anger rises against you, don't leave your place, for calmness puts great offenses to rest." This is a picture of the leader who shouts and screams at those he's leading. He's the one who verbally abuses those who are under him. He thinks that he's above everyone else and he can use his position to speak in this way. When we experience that kind of leader, our first response is to run away. We want to get out. We want to quit. Solomon tells us how to deal with this. He says, don't do something foolish. Don't quit. Stay where you are and stay calm. He said in Proverbs 15:1, "A gentle answer turns away anger, but a harsh word stirs up wrath." He said in chapter 25, verse 15, "A ruler can be persuaded through patience, and a gentle tongue can break a bone." Paul said in Romans 12:18, "If possible on your part, live at peace with everyone." Again, Solomon in Proverbs said, "Patience is better than power, and controlling one's temper than capturing a city." Rudyard Kipling said, "If you keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, you're a man." So, if possible, the servant leader is able to influence the irrational leader. Stay where you are, don't quit. Notice he talks about irresponsible leaders. Chapter 10, verse 5. "There is an evil I have seen under the sun, an error proceeding from the presence of the ruler. The fool is appointed to great heights, but the rich man in lowly positions. I have seen slaves on horses, but princes walking on the ground like slaves." Now, when he says I've seen slaves on horses, in that day the common citizen didn't own a horse. Slaves certainly did not own a horse. But he's describing just the opposite. The princes rode on horses, but now they're walking like slaves. And slaves who are to be walking are now riding on horses. He's talking about the type of leader who puts unqualified people in positions of leadership, influencing those who are under them. Weak, passive leaders often put weak people around them because of their own insecurity or just laziness. What does the wise person do? The wise person trusts God's sovereignty. You embrace your position and let God use you to influence the irresponsible leader. Then he talks about inexperienced leaders. Go over to verse 16. We'll come back to the other verses. He says, "Woe to you, land, when your king is a household servant." That could be translated child as well. "And your princes feast in the morning. Blessed are you, land, when your king is a son of nobles, and your princes feast at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness." Now, what's he talking about? Solomon speaks of inexperienced leaders who are put in their position because of family ties, because of friends or political favors. We see that all the time, don't we? But the problem is they don't know what they're doing. In the mornings, when they should be caring for their work, home, or government, they're feasting, they're drinking, they're enjoying the perks of the job without getting the job done. Unfortunately, even older leaders can still act childish. We need godly, wise, mature leaders. Young leaders can be effective. Solomon's father, David, was a young man when he became king. And he was the greatest king Israel ever had for 40 years. It was the golden age for Israel. But that's out of the norm. We need to be careful with putting inexperienced leaders in high positions of leadership. Then he talks about inactive leaders. Verse 18, because of laziness, the roof caves in. And because of negligent hands, the house leaks. A feast is prepared for laughter, and wine makes life happy, and money is the answer for everything. Now, guys, I hope I don't get you in trouble, but Solomon's talking about the guy who's at home watching TV and playing video games. And there are things to be done, but he's not getting them done. He's supposed to be doing his work, providing for those in the home. But the house is falling apart, he says. The roof is leaking, and the bills are stacking up. Not assuming responsibility. This is the illustration of what happens to inactive, lazy leaders. That procrastination ruins a nation. It ruins a business, can ruin your own home. Wise, godly leaders do just the opposite. They're diligent. They're working hard. And they get the business done. They take care of business. Whatever it takes, they're going to get it done. It's all about stewardship. Solomon says in verse 19 that those who are active leaders have the necessary provisions for life when the needs arise. There's too much foolish leadership in our world today. And God's called all of us as Christians to be wise and godly leaders. Notice, now he talks about foolishness in work. Michael LaBeouf says in his book, Working Smart, that the key to better production is not working longer hours, but working more efficiently with the hours that you have. There's no substitute for putting time in. That has to be done. But it doesn't mean much if you're not working as wisely as possible. Notice verse 8. The one who digs a pit may fall into it, and the one who breaks through a wall may be bitten by a snake. The one who quarries stones may be hurt by them. The one who splits trees may be endangered by them. If the axe is dulled and one does not sharpen its edge, then one must exert more strength. However, the advantage of wisdom is that it brings success. If the snake bites before it is charmed, then there is no advantage for the charmer. Now notice these illustrations of what he talks about foolishness in work. First, he says a man digs a pit and falls into it. He may have the energy, he has the ability, he has the perseverance, but he doesn't stay away from the edge. He's not careful. He's not watching what he is doing, and it leads to disaster. Secondly, a man knocks out a section of a wall but forgets that there are snakes in the cool places. He reaches in and he's bitten by the snakes. Metaphorically, he's describing that snakes are always lurking nearby in the dark. And so we've got to be very careful in our work, being aware, paying attention. He watches out for them. Then a man works in a stone quarry. He becomes careless and a large stone falls on him. A foolish worker doesn't anticipate that possible danger. He gets distracted and he makes a mistake. So easy now to get distracted, isn't it? Yesterday I was driving and I saw a young woman, probably a teenage girl, maybe 20, and she was turning from Kings Highway onto Lexington. And as she is turning, she's looking at her phone. I thought, good night, I'm getting out of her way. I mean, we're so distracted, but the little distractions of life can lead to great ruin. He says the wise worker stays focused. Then he says a man splits wood. He misses and cuts his leg. The axe head's not secure, and so it flies off the handle and hits someone and hurts them. Or the tree falls on him or somebody else. The wise worker anticipates those kinds of problems. Then he says a wise man does not sharpen his axe. He works twice as long. It takes twice as much energy for half the results. Not working smart. He has the right resources, though, to accomplish his task. Here's the deal. Wisdom gives you a sharper edge. You have a great advantage if you have God's wisdom. A snake charmer is bitten by the snake, which was common in that day. And he says that if he doesn't charm the snake before he is bitten, then he's not going to make a profit. People aren't going to pay to watch him charm the snake. It means he has wisdom, but he doesn't know how to apply it. He doesn't know how to use it. So how many of us have suffered because we knew wisdom, we knew what to do, but we didn't apply it? We knew we shouldn't be around those people. We knew we shouldn't be in that place. We know that it's a temptation, and so we yield to it. We fall. All of these illustrations prove Solomon's point. When you use your hands, use your head. Be a wise worker. Now, notice finally, he talks about foolishness in words. Usually, the easiest way to spot a fool is how he speaks, right? You know, they may do something and we're not really sure, but when they talk, you can spot them. We need to be wise with our words. Jesus said in Matthew 12, "For the mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart." And Solomon gives 5 illustrations of those who are foolish with their words. Notice, he talks about the unkind tongue in verse 12. "The words from the mouth of a wise man are gracious, but the lips of a fool consume him." A wise person has a mouth that is gracious. They're loving and kind. Even when they need to be direct and address a problem, they are still kind. And what does that do? It reciprocates itself. The person is able to respond kindly most of the time and willingly, and is able to listen to instruction. People will respect you in a gracious way and respond to you in that way. The words of the fool, though, he says, will ruin himself. Then there's the unwise tongue in verse 13. "The beginning of the words of his mouth is folly, but the end of his speaking is evil madness." Have you noticed that the longer a foolish person speaks, the worse it gets? And it sounds crazy. Well, Solomon says it's not only crazy, it's evil. Satan will use that and use it in a way to destroy you and others around you. Notice he talks about the untamed tongue, verse 14. "Yet the fool multiplies words. No one knows what will happen, and who can tell anyone what will happen after him?" In spite of the danger that the fool is facing, he keeps on talking. Instead of responding the right way, he's just adding more words. He's always got an opinion. Do you know people who like to hear themselves talk? I mean, yeah, they just keep on talking and talking and talking. A wise person says enough, but not too much. What he says is always good. Notice the unreasonable tongue, verse 15. "The struggles of fools weary them, for they don't know how to go to the city." Now this is what he's saying. His advice is so bad, he doesn't know how to give you directions to Enterprise right over here. I mean, you just stop listening to them. Their advice is terrible. The lengthy explanation of how to do something, getting directions, wears them out. The fool claims to know everything he's saying, but they really don't know anything. The wise person speaks with measured reason. He says, what he says is right, and it's helpful. Don't you love being around people like that? They're not wordy, but when they speak, it's the E.F. Hutton moment. Show my age here. When they speak, people listen. What they say is right, and it's helpful. You want to get around those kind of people. Then the unfaithful tongue, verse 20. "Do not curse the king even in your thoughts, and do not curse a rich person even in your bedroom, for a bird of the sky may carry the message." You know, earlier when I talked about the fly in the perfume jar, we often say there's a fly in the ointment. That's where we get that. Right here, we get "a little bird told me." That's where it comes from right here. A little bird told me. Now, what is he talking about? A wise person doesn't say something in private that he does not want heard in public. He doesn't anticipate what's going to happen when the slandered person finds out what he says. And that creates disaster. Well, we've all experienced that. Using the bird illustrates the speed at which words travel. Now, I'll give you a current day illustration. Have you been on your phone talking to somebody? You got a friend with you, and you're talking to somebody, and you hang up, and then you start talking about that person to the friend that's next to you, and you look down at your phone, and all of a sudden you realize, I didn't turn it off. Has that ever happened? And the person on the other line's hearing, You talk about them to the guy sitting next to you. Now let me tell you, that's a bad day when that happens. You don't want a day like that. A wise person is not only careful with what he says, he is faithful in what he says. So rather than being foolish, we need to be wise in the little things, in our leadership, in our work, and in our words. Now I want to give you 4 questions as a takeaway this morning, all right? That'll help us summarize the message. Number 1, are you wise or foolish in the little things? Is there a little sin? Probably a few minutes ago when I was going through that point, the Holy Spirit is saying, yep, you got that little thing going on there, and that needs to stop. Because if you don't stop it, it's going to become bigger and bigger, and you'll end up saying, I never thought it would lead to this. So pay attention to the little thing. Now, this may be the most important thing I say in the whole sermon about this point. Obedience in the little things will honor God, position you with spiritual power and blessing, and make an eternal difference. Secondly, are you wise or foolish in your leadership? God honors and blesses rational, responsible, experienced, active leaders. If you're a leader, then lead with godly wisdom. Third, are you wise or foolish in your work? Work is ordained by God. Work is not a curse of God. The curse in the garden was not work, it was the sweat that comes from work. So work is something that we have been given to by God, and we should glorify God in our work, whatever that work is that you're doing. Godly wisdom empowers you to work smarter and have greater influence to the glory of God. Finally, are you wise or foolish in your words? I wish I had time to go through James chapter 3. It talks about how to tame the tongue and how evil and destructive it can be. And James summarizes this section with these words. Who is wise and understanding among you? He should show his works by good conduct with wisdom's gentleness. But if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your heart, don't brag and lie in defiance of the truth. Be honest about it. Such wisdom does not come down from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every kind of evil. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peace-loving, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits, without favoritism and hypocrisy. That's the way that we need to be speaking with our words, using godly wisdom. Would you bow your head and close your eyes? There might be somebody here today who say, Pastor, I want godly wisdom. Well, if you want godly wisdom, you need to know God. You need to have a relationship with God. And we don't have a relationship with God because of our sin. Sin separates us from God. And God took care of our sin problem, the payment that is required of us, which is death, our lives. He took care of that problem by letting his Son, Jesus Christ, God himself, coming to us in the flesh, living a sinless life, and became the perfect sacrifice for us. Instead of us paying for our sin, Jesus paid it with his own life. And so that's a true story. It's a good story. But it takes more than that. It takes more than just believing the story. It means that I'm willing to turn from my sin and turn from self, trusting in myself, my good works, to earn a way to heaven, and turning to Jesus Christ alone for salvation. That means that I believe that the work he did on the cross was for me. And now I'm willing to follow him. Not just believe in him, but to follow him. We're not perfect in that, but that's the desire of the heart. I want to live a godly life. I want now God's wisdom to be applied to my life. And so if that's what you desire today, in just a moment when we sing this next song, I'm inviting you to come to give your heart to the Lord. The pastors will be here at the front. You may not know what to say or do, but they do, and they'll help you. Many in this room know the Lord and you love him. But maybe there's a little thing that needs to be dealt with. It's a lot better if it's dealt privately than publicly. So deal with it. Confess that to the Lord, receive his forgiveness, and move on. Maybe you need wisdom about a certain matter. You don't want to be foolish about the circumstance you're facing right now. James says, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives freely and without reservation, and in no way will condemn you. So we ask, God, give me the wisdom that I need. And be patient while he gives that. And you wait for that answer. And he'll be faithful to do that. Trust him. He wants to help you. He's not playing games. He wants to help you. He wants you to do the right thing the right way. Then there might be some that God is leading you to become part of our church family. Maybe you've been visiting for a while and you want to be a part of what we're doing here and around the world, and we'd love for you to join us. You come if God leads you. Others may want to come and pray at the altar alone, or maybe you want someone to pray for you. Then you let us know and we'll pray for you. Father, thank you that we're able to possess your wisdom. We're able to know what to do the right thing. And God, it's a matter of us knowing you and having that relationship with you and seeking you through prayer and your word, getting godly advice. Father, there are many people here today with many different needs. Help these who need to come now. In Jesus' name, amen.